Good afternoon. I'm Jennifer Wilson, and welcome to Leadership Lunch Chat, where I have the great fortune of uh, debating and discussing and kind of exploring issues of leadership with my very good friend Amy Vetter. Hi, Amy.
Hi.
So, welcome to all of you who are going to, I hope, help us figure out in today's Leadership Lunch Chat how to shorten the innovation cycle. So really, like right now, there is so much cool technology available. And innovation isn't just technology, but I think Amy and I might take it more from that angle today. And there's just so many wonderful options and ideas for change inside our firms. And as public accounting professionals, we tend to be conservative and maybe, perfectionistic, and we like to form a lot of committees and have a lot of discussion and debate, many layers of approval, and we can sometimes get in our own way related to, being nimble, getting out ahead of our competitors, and really could even stifle true innovation in our firms if we're not careful. So in this conversation, Amy and I thought we would start, just trying to pull apart what could we do as leaders to shorten the innovation cycle and drive change faster in our firms. So Amy, I'm going to give you that as the backdrop, and you can start wherever you feel like.
Sure. So I think one of the things that is very different in the industry profession we're in this day and age is speed. And where, when we think about 20 years ago of, let's just use technology as an example, since you brought it up. If you'd replace an application, you walked away from it from 20 years, so it was an investment that stayed in there for a very long time, and you didn't have to worry about replacing it for a while. And that is just not the world we live in anymore. And also what the market values from their professionals as well is speed to an answer. So, not going to get into all the billable models and so forth, but this is one of the problems because it really isn't about how long it takes you to get it as far as churning out numbers and trying to number crunch yourself. It's testing a bunch of tools of how fast you can get an answer to provide value. The problem is if we don't have a process in place to be able to innovate, try new things, play with our speed to market, in this day and age, we're going to easily get surpassed, either by an investment where other firms might have investments in whole teams to be able to do this, or smaller boutique firms that have gone out on their own that are nimble enough to be able to try new things and deliver a different kind of service, which changes the expectation of the market. And so I think a lot of times what we see is what I would call paralysis analysis, because we cannot predict the perfect solution until we try it. And we've got to be able to create a culture where it's okay to try things, doesn't work, try something else, know that we do have to innovate in certain ways, but create a culture where everyone's incentivized to move with speed to try to innovate things rather than incentivized. I'm just going to go back to the billable hour. Why change anything? And we stay in the manual processes and budgets that we've been in the past.
Yeah. Well, and I think, I know that I know I want things to be perfect, I'm scared to make a mistake. I've had this business 25 years and I've made plenty of those mistakes and somehow magically and amazingly have survived them. And you can't be entrepreneurial if you don't say, yeah, I might be perfectionistic and I might have fear, but I'm doing it anyway. I'm going to try anyway. and I think that we just need to acknowledge that, we're not saying that you won't have feelings of like, should we do this? But we've got to get into some kind of a cycle. I was reading about a cycle, and I'm not going to be able to attribute this. It was some sort of a health, maybe even a government institute or something that had a cycle for innovation, and it was Plan, Do, Study, Act. Plan, Do, Study, Act. And we'll find it later who invented that, if we can find attribution. But the idea was like plan the change, like form a committee, figure out what we're going to change, and then do is the second step in this thing. Do something, try something, and then study what happened with that. So piloting, small groups, but do. Plan, do, then study what happened, and then act on any modifications, changes, or pivots that you have to make from that process. And I think many of us have a lot of other steps before do, and we don't jump in fast enough. And so anyway, I think that that's just something for us to think about. And what are we afraid of? Obviously, we don't want to, send out invoices to every single client on a new billing system when we haven't tested the invoice format or something. You don't do on that kind of scale and have that many people impacted by mistakes. But, small group innovation with many revision cycles, and still like going live and trying some stuff every time with every one of those cycles makes a lot of sense. And it gives people hope, and it gets people excited when they can see that we're not going to take a long time here, and that we are trying different things. And sometimes I'm looking at this whole world of AI and all the different ways we could automate different components, from the productivity components, which many of us already have been automating to some degree or another, recap writers, that sort of thing, to be more productive in just day-to-day work. But, like in our different disciplines, different ways we could implement AI and different tools that are out there. And one of the things I'm trying to tell my clients is, hey, we don't know which tool will be the best tool because they're not all innovated and developed and out yet, So you're not probably picking the best tool right now. You're probably picking a tool that you've heard from others works, or, you've tested internally, but you don't think you're going to ride that horse forever. You're probably going to swap that tool for other things as they come out. The market's not mature. It's far from mature. So you can't expect that you're picking from a bunch of best in class. What you're doing is trying and learning from people who are at the very leading edge of these ideas. And I think sometimes we get hung up. I know in the olden days, very olden days, we used to say things like, I don't want to be on the bleeding edge of technology. I'll let other people have all the pain and suffering and I'll come in later. I don't think you can do that anymore. And part of it is, it doesn't matter what the tool is, you're learning from the tool. Mm-hmm. So by getting in there and doing it, your paradigm will shift. The way that you view process and work product and analysis and a whole bunch of other things will shift dramatically, because what is possible with these technologies and with AI and just the generative AI, it'll blow your brains out. You got to get in there and play with it, because it'll just blow you away what's possible. You can't conceive of it till you're in there. So who cares if the tool is the exact right one later? It taught you something, and it taught your team something. And that's what I think is so crucial. You've got to get in.
Yeah. A couple of things come to mind from what you're talking about. One is knowing your outcomes that you're looking for. So not the how and how you're going to get there, but some metric to evaluate these tools as you test them, right? Because everyone can be like, oh, this tool's cool. But are we trying to save time? Are we trying to get to a better answer? Are we trying to eliminate other applications we use? Are we trying to say, we don't think we should have to hire more people. We think automation can fix this task. We've got to be really clear on what those outcomes are so that you can move faster and people can test more things and be able to compare and contrast. And so testing doesn't mean that everyone has to test the same tool, that as long as we have the metric of the different tools they're testing, they can report out on that metric and what they saw based on that. Because like Jennifer said, you know, technology, if you like technology, it's very cool and is always one of those things where you get excited about it. But what gaps does it have that you're going to have to circumvent because it's missing that? Or what will you still need, or so forth? The second thing I just wanted to bring up when we talk about speed, and Jennifer was talking about having a process for that. The other thing is that a lot of times in the tech world, it's called doing sprints. And so you have meetings where you've got a sprint for next week that everyone's going to implement one of these tools for a certain process in order to get a certain result. And by Friday, everybody's coming back to say, did it work? What worked? What didn't work? What could be better? And then revising the plan and doing your next sprint. So it's not like you're saying, we're going to accomplish all of this in the next 3 months, that you divide it in small sprints so that it's doable and you can move faster in the process to get the information and the research that you're looking for in order to feel comfortable in it. Because what we can't do is try to evaluate all that without using it and saying that something will work without giving it an option. And if you're not the person that likes this kind of stuff, know enough from an emotional intelligence perspective to get out of the way. You might be able to help with the metrics and the analysis of the results, find your lane in this process. But if this is fearful for you to change the way that you work and how that you work and the way you've always done things, then allow yourself to move out of the way for people that aren't as afraid to do things differently, to change the way that things happen, because that's what I see mostly of what happens is a lot of discussion around that we want these things to happen. But when it goes into operations, there's a lot of heels in the sand stopping it from happening.
Oh gosh, change objection. I've never heard of it before. Yeah, so I love where you are there. Before I pick up on that and go further maybe on it, I want to also just acknowledge that one of the big impediments, besides like just our own desire to do it our way or not change or not learn something new or all those things that get in our way, I think one of the biggest things in our way in this whole process, besides perfectionism and like the old methods that we've been using, is also an unwillingness, inability, or lack of clarity about how to allocate the hours to do this kind of testing. So everybody go off and test this thing by Friday and come back. The different tools are tested and we'll all report back on those different tools. Well, I think that's a great, way of going, except that firms still are saying all these people that are supposed to be supporting innovation should also be highly billable and have client deadlines and carry too big a load. And so I just want to acknowledge one of our reasons for being so slow at change is because we try to fit it into non-peak periods. And then we still have people who need to bill and collect and clean up and mop up from their peak period, and they're supposed to be innovating. People are not like clear-minded enough or clear-desked enough to do this work. And so I would say one of the most important things we could be doing right now is devising this emotionally intelligent innovation group that Amy speaks of, not a bunch of heel diggers and not a bunch of anti-tech people, but people that are like super interested in this or reading about it and already wanting to do it. and saying, how can I free some of these people up a certain number of hours over the course of this next 120 days and get an innovation committee and work the sprints and work the methodology and make sure they don't feel like they're having to squeeze it in or do it in their spare time or do it at night, because that's unlikely to get the kind of effort and focus and enthusiasm from your people if it's just like, do this important thing, but we're not going to budget for it. And we see it all the time, and it's not cool to do that anymore. It's not okay. And we also have a decent number of people that are not client facing. Good operational administrators, good client service people, good folks within the practice that could support some of this too. And so, including them as well. But that's one of my big fears. And then this idea of adoption, once we're going to do it, there need to be like real KPIs and real visibility, almost like a scorecard or a scoreboard or something that shows, like if we're going to, move a certain number of tax returns to a certain technology to minimize human intervention on those returns, so simple 1040s or whatever, like having every person that has 1040s in their column and keeping track of how many of them have moved by when and telling what percent has to be moved. Here's what we're expecting of you. There's no visibility usually to the measure of change. It's very hard to tell who's changing and who's not, other than people complaining or something. But you start actually saying, this is what our goal is. This is how many we want moved by this date. And we're going to start, illustrating by service line and by biller or our service delivery person how many of theirs have moved. Then it starts to get awkward to be the heels in the sand guy. Or at least it's super visible that I'm that. And then that has to be managed. That has to be, strong leadership has to have conversations that say it's not okay to hold your stuff to the side. We're moving and you have to come with us. So I don't think there's enough of that happening.
Yeah. So I think looking at your leadership meetings and deciding who on the leadership team, if they're not already an IT or innovation or business transformation person responsible for this, who would be the person pushing this along in the organization from a leadership perspective is very, very important. And reporting out to the leadership team on what is happening and what the results are and what the outcomes are, meeting those metrics that you're looking for as an organization, and being able to be very open and honest. Because I think what I see a lot of times is in the leadership room, everyone agrees, but then when it comes to their department, they might push back. So we've got to get that transparency and vulnerability happening in the leadership meetings that are behind closed doors of where that's happening in the organization and understanding why. To Jen's point, those are the times as a leader, a lot of times that you've got to step back and pause and really truly understand why you're pushing back. And it could be you feel like your teams are already overwhelmed, that they've already got. So then how do we solve that? We've got to get into the emotion behind it so that we can get past it and the organization can move forward, especially if you want to be a going concern as you are as an independent organization in the future, because the alternative is that you would have less decision-making ability, because you would be moving into a realm where you'd have to find other investors or other people that are going to have the power to make sure it happens. So
yeah. And the power authority, yeah. Well, I love this conversation, Amy, and I feel like we just scratched the very tippy top of the surface of it. There's so much more that we could talk about related to, both mechanics in the business, but also leadership behaviors. I just hope everybody here is trying to figure out, how can I produce something cool and innovative, a real sea change this summer in my practice in some way, whether it's part of your business process or your service delivery processes, in your sales and marketing. I don't care what it is, but there are so many cool technologies available for us to get in there and make change. And we can't do it the way we always have. And we can't do it, like one change a year or something. We have to be thinking like one significant breakthrough in innovation a month right now on the technology side, in my opinion. And so I just pray that you'll allocate the resources, free them up, give them the appropriate direction and visibility to their efforts, and then really drive the change process in your firm. And we'd love to hear how you're doing it. And also, I know Amy and I want to hear about all the cool things you're doing, what you've already learned and found out, what you're already doing, or what you're planning to do this summer. So hit us up in social or reach to us directly. I did not ask Caroline, I'm such a dork, whether or not we're on next week. I can't remember, and so anyway, we may be here next Friday or not, but we are here most Fridays at 12 noon. So I hope you'll tune in with us again soon. And we really appreciate you allowing us this time to process these ideas. Have a great day and a great weekend, everybody.
Have a great weekend.